A quick disclaimer for this week's episode, please check the trigger warnings below in the podcast description before listening. Welcome to the Book Tea with V. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Book Tea with V, and my God, we are in August. How did that happen? Honestly, the years, the days, the weeks, they're just going so quickly, it's scary. But let's start, as always, and let's talk some pop culture. Now, I don't know if this counts as pop culture, but I'm of course going to talk about the Olympics. It's absolutely everywhere, and it's one of my favorite things ever. Honestly, I watch every single sport. I don't care what sport it is, what country's competing. I love it. And personally for me, I was born in England and I was raised there till I was about 15. And then we moved to Australia. So I kind of root for two countries, but I'm just obsessed with it. Now let's get into the book tea because there is a fair bit and I just know that I'm going to butcher this author's name. So RuNyx came out with a bit of a teaser for The Syndicate. Now this is a part of the Dark Verse series. And if you know me well, you know that I started with the first book of this series and I just couldn't quite get into it. And everyone's been like, what are you doing? You need to go back. You need to focus and read it again, or even try the audio. So I'm going to be trying the audio soon because I need to get on this hype train, honestly. Everyone is loving it. They're so excited. I need to get on board. But that's not even all from this author. We also have Enigma coming out on the 29th of October, and that's like a dark academia standalone. I also have Gothikana on my bookcase, yet to read. I need to get my ass in gear, I swear. And then we had a cover reveal from Jennika Snow, and it's for All the Dangerous Things, which will be out on the 30th of September. And this is a part of her Underworld King series. It is such a good series. I had no idea that another book was coming out. It's Mafia, it's delicious, and as always with Jennika Snow, that spice, it did not disappoint. Now, by the time that this episode comes out, Luna Mason would have dropped her cover reveal for Crave. And just knowing that Alexi's book is her favorite that she's written so far, I am so excited for this book. I was obsessed with chaos and caged in this series. But I feel like Crave, I don't know. I feel like every single Luna Mason book that I read, it's like, right, okay, that's my favorite now. And then I read her next book and I'm like, okay, that's my favorite now. I'm so excited for this next release. I swear to God. And then lastly, you would have seen that Rina Kent has brought out a luxury bundle edition for the Legacy of God series. And my thoughts straight away were how stunning these books are, these special edition books. They are the pastel colors, you get letters within them, but those pastel designs, they sing to me. They are so stunning. And yes, there has also been discussion about the price, how expensive it is. Yes, it's expensive. Very expensive. But then I just cried in Australian shipping prices. I just feel like we get a rough ticket in Australia when we order anything from America. I feel like it's like, of course it is shipping this way. We're so far away. But my God, did I really feel far away in that moment when I was like, okay, I'm going to make this work. I really, really want them. And then shipping was like half the amount of the books themselves. I still really want to make this work. I really, really want them on my bookshelves. Am I going to make it happen? I've still got till the 25th of August. We'll see, guys. We'll see. What were your thoughts on the book covers? I thought they were stunning. So I thought I'd do a mid-year check-in. It's a little late, mind you. We're now in August, but I thought I would do a mid-year check-in on what my 5-star reads have been so far, or at least a few of them. Because I feel like the year goes so quickly and I'm like, okay, and you sort of forget the books you've read because you read so much. So I just wanted to go through my 5-star reads of the year so far. So first on the list, we have Hunted by a Shadow by Michelle Hurd. And this was like a Mafia, Beauty and the Beast retelling. I remember crying about 10% into this book. It was one of her best books. The Mafia element is always amazing with Michelle Hurd. But this book had everything. It had the spice level, it had the plot, but it just had the emotion there too. 5 stars, loved it. And then we had My Dark Desire come out by LJ Shen and Parker S. Huntington. And I loved My Dark Romeo. This series is shaping up to be one of my favorite series of all time. Every book is a 5-star so far. And My Dark Desire, no different. The tension was just off the charts. If you haven't read this series yet, if you haven't read My Dark Romeo or My Dark Desire yet, I could not recommend them more. Toxic Love by Jagger Cole. This book, like I love Jagger Cole books and I make that no secret, but this particular book, the way the plot was, it's my favorite Jagger Cole book of all time. I absolutely love it. The plot sent me through a hoop, and Jagger Cole style, you don't have to worry about the spice. It's always like a 4 spice level with Jagger Cole. But the plot was the thing that sticks with me. I still remember it start to finish. 5 stars, loved it. And of course, I have to mention Some Evil Winners books because I swear her books are always a 4-star at least. But I've had a couple of 5 stars from her too. And of course, I have to talk about Alexi and Thorns of Silence. These are Mafia, they're dark, they are so good. If you haven't started your Evil Winners journey yet, please do. I've got a video on my TikTok about a reading order, but also go onto her website. It's very clear of, where to start from. So good. Then we have God of War by Rina Kent. And this got mixed reviews when it came out. I adored it. It's my favorite of the entire series. I said what I said. I just feel like I didn't have any expectations of Ava and Eli's story. I sort of didn't have, any, what's the word? Theories. I didn't have any theories of what was going to happen. So I felt like for the people that did, they may have been let down when their theory wasn't right. I don't know. I just know that it was perfection to me. It was another 5-star, obsessed. And the last 5-star I want to talk about is Caged by Luna Mason. And I said it before, Luna Mason comes out with a new book. I'm obsessed with it. That's just the way it goes. This is single dad, badass FMC, Mafia, amazing. That is all. So we've come to our interview segment, and this week's author is just, guys, I have a girl crush. She is incredible. And when I think of her books, and her as an author actually as well, I think of a Lana Del Rey album. I am, of course, talking about the incredible Giana Darling. Giana Darling, thank you so much for being on the Book 2 with V. I have a girl crush. It's official.
Well, I'm super honored to be here with you. I have been looking forward to this, so thank you for having me.
Anytime. And I hope this isn't the last time either.
Me too.
So I always start at the beginning because I find it so interesting. I know that you are an avid reader, you love your books, but when did your writing journey start? Did you have a plot in your mind? How did that go for you?
So, actually, I have wanted to be a writer since I was 8 years old, and I did my first creative writing assignment in a giant poster pumpkin for a Halloween story in my fourth grade class. And I've been writing ever since. So, it wasn't like there was this one story that came to me. It was this almost lifelong dream of being a published author. And I actually decided on romance quite practically because it was such a burgeoning genre and there was so much kind of room to grow in romance. And at the heart of every story I'd ever read, and I love lots of different kinds of stories, was the romance. I always loved a romance. And it kind of gives you leeway to write a bunch of different kinds of stories as long as there's a love story. So I loved it for practical reasons and I loved the kind of freedom it gave me. And the first book that I published was The Affair, and I didn't tell anyone about it. And it had been a story I first conceived of when I was 16, and I published it when I was 24. Obviously, it got a few iterations over the years, but that story and then the subsequent stories about that family, the Lombardi family, those came to me when I was 16 years old. So I kind of have what I call creative ADD. I have ideas all the time. I always want to write the next book or this new story. And it's actually more about disciplining myself to go one story at a time.
I love that though. I mean, you were so young to have come up with such a story at 16.
I was raised by a single mom, and I and my grandparents before they passed also raised me. My favorite show was Frasier. My favorite book was Pride and Prejudice. I didn't relate well to my peers, needless to say. Um, so reading was really what I did all the time, reading and writing. And I think definitely having started writing at age 8, by the time I was 14, I had my 10,000 hours. And that was just kind of how my brain evolved, was to storytell.
Oh, I love that. And you've mentioned Jane Austen before because I know that you're a massive fan of Jane Austen. You've got John Irving, I believe. If you had
Hmm.
to pick your favorite book of all time, would it still be Pride and Prejudice, or do you have a couple of others?
Oh gosh, that is so tough. I mean, I think that Pride and Prejudice is the easiest call, not to be incredibly cliche, but I reread it every year. I watch the BBC miniseries or the 2005 feature film with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadyen at least once a month. I watch both of those
Mhm.
things. And my husband actually at this point is just like, he thinks I have a problem, like a medical problem, because I'm so obsessed. So that is my comfort read. I feel like that is my, um, I took a class on Jane Austen in university, and I remember I got 99% as my final grade. And the professor said, "We're not allowed to give 100%, but I think you could teach this class better than me because I've read all of Jane Austen's books like 80 times." So it's probably safe to say that that book, honestly, yeah, I think that that book probably is a pillar of my personality. So I can choose that as my favorite.
And I think there are just so many, but there's just that book that sticks with you for life. And
Hmm.
it just so happens that fortunately, the series and that film just actually took it to life. You know how sometimes you're like, that is
Yeah.
the worst adaptation that you could have ever done of that book. But this one, that film is one of my favorites too. It is one of the most beautifully done films I've ever seen.
The casting, the
Yeah.
costumes, the settings, the cinematography, the music, every single thing is perfection. And I think it's wonderful. I always say that that adaptation and Call Me by Your Name, which is a book to film adaptation, um, that those are the two best book to film adaptations I've ever seen. I think they're chef's kiss perfection, no notes, amazing. And usually that's not the case because when we see our books go to screen, it can be really tough with all the changes they make.
Oh, I can imagine. I think I'd have a little bit of, fear of letting go of the
Oh,
content.
completely. Even when people ask me, like, oh, do you want to see your books on screen? I mean, of course, I think every author in the whole world wants to see their books brought to life. But at the same time, there really is an anxiety there of you don't have control over what they do. I mean, they take your material and they can do whatever they want with it. So I can imagine it would be incredibly difficult because as a reader, it's difficult for me to see my favorite books brought to life in a way I don't enjoy. So yeah, it's complicated.
But you're not even like I always do a bit of stalking when before an author comes on, and it's always so much fun because you learn so much off the website. But I feel like when I was on your website, I just my jaw was on the floor every single sentence that I was reading. Like there is so much to you as an author, but there's so much to you as a person. You lived in Paris, lived in France. You were a food blogger. You're into your sports. You coach.
Mhm.
You're a history buff. I just honestly, when I say I've got a girl crush, I mean it.
Well, I'm very honored.
But I feel like I've already got so much in common with you. I love history. History is one of my true loves. And I think that out of all of it, I mean, there are so many questions I could ask, but I'm selfish. So I'll ask the question I want to ask.
Of
And
course.
it's, it would be what would your favorite time of history be? Do you have a specific time period that you go, oh, you know what? That's the one that just sings to me?
It's tough for me to answer that question because I do have and I've gone through phases, I should say, really phases of deep diving into different times. Um, so it's hard to pinpoint. I actually might sidestep the question and say one of my favorite things to kind of focus on in history is I love to study. I don't want to say just dictators, but like I love to study dictators, emperors, um, generals. I really love how throughout history studying basically the development of a cult of personality. And that goes all the way back to Alexander the Great, who I was obsessed with for years and took
Mhm.
classes on in university. And I even wrote a short story about Alexander the Great and Hephaestion, his friend. Um, and then all the way up to, through Napoleon, through um, Lenin and Stalin and Mao, and I just find it really interesting um, how these people have now carved out a place in history that's all about them. And there's dozens or hundreds and hundreds of scholars who dedicate their lives to studying how they changed their world. And I just, of course, they're incredibly flawed and lacking, and some of them were totalitarian dictatorships. But it's just a really interesting study into not just them, but also human psychology and how easily we're swayed. So
Yes.
that's kind of it's not so much a time period, but it's definitely something of common vein that I've found
Yes.
myself drawn throughout history.
I can
What
relate
about
to
you?
that, actually. No, I can. Do you know what? The one thing that really sings to me was Victorian times and Tudor times. And
Yeah.
I was the same. Like, we were learning about it in school. We didn't even have a project on it, but I made there be a project. I was like, yeah, here's my project. And they were like, Vanessa, there's no, we didn't have a project on this. Oh, I know. But I stayed up and, made my nan go and do scrapbooking with me. And
That is so me too. I totally relate to that. Just like this, but I think, it speaks to passion.
Mhm.
Obviously you're a passionate person and I consider myself a passionate person too. And a lot of that has to do with curiosity. And as soon as something kind of sparks that curiosity, you're really drawn to deep diving into it and learning everything you can about it. And I think that's a wonderful characteristic in a human.
I no, I agree, and that's why I think when I saw that you were like you loved your history, I was like, there's a certain piece of someone that loves history like that much as well, enough to deep dive into it, enough to have it almost as a like on the side hobby, I guess.
Completely. And it's really interesting. And just a tangential little story. I took a creative business coaching course a while ago, and a lot of authors do this, and you have to take a test called the Clifton Strengths Finder test. Okay. So it's 34 characteristics, and you take this test, and it gives you your top five, top 10, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
My number one characteristic, which was one of the rarest ones to have as number one, is context. And
Ah,
context is history. So basically, my whole brain is geared towards, it says it's history students, sometimes literature students, people who need to know the context for everything. And it actually applies to my books in a really interesting way, and that so many of my books start when the hero and heroine haven't met yet, when they're really young. It spans across years
yeah.
because I want everyone to know the context of those people's lives in order to get them as individuals and as a couple. So it is interesting. And I think that you probably have high context too. These people that really want to know why and how something happened.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I definitely see that in your books now. When you say that, I'm like, no, that makes sense. You look
Yeah.
back to any of them actually, where it is, you've got that age gap. So they've had different times in their life. So when they are
Hmm.
together, there's so much history there, which we love. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but you completed your first novel in 2016. And then obviously you had the first book in the Fallen series, which is just hugely popular. But again, through doing some stalking, you mentioned that you spend a bit of time on your man's bike. And
Mm.
I just, I was like, this woman, oh my God. Like, oh, okay. I just pictured like the Lana Del Rey song in my head and, the ride, just wind in your hair. Were you doing that before you wrote the series? Like, do you find any inspiration from you guys riding together for the books that you write?
It's such a great question. And actually, so my man has had a motorcycle for a number of years now, but I believe he did not at the time of Lessons in Corruption. And um, I don't think I had ridden on it. I'd ridden on one bike before that, and it was not a Harley, and it was with another boyfriend. And I really hated the experience. Actually, I almost fell off because he took
Mhm.
off so quickly. Um, in fact, the reason that I started writing MC romances was because sometimes I'm relatively contrary, and I did not like MC romance.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I'm going to write an MC romance that I would enjoy. And really, even beyond that, it was just a picture of the model Christopher Mason leaning against a motorcycle that I saw on Pinterest one day. And it just sparked to life like Athena just being birthed from the head of Zeus, this
Mhm.
idea for King and Cressida and the whole Fallen Men series. So it wasn't actually my real life. And to be quite honest with you, apart from informing my books about locales because I love to travel. I would say I don't pull much inspiration from my life.
Yeah.
There's some things that readers will be like, oh, I've noticed that there's a lot of problems with parents in your books. Like, did you have a problem with your parents? Or, a lot of the times a parent passes away. My father passed away when I was 18. There's things like that that you kind of subconsciously are drawn to. But in terms of actual kind of data from my life, I prefer my imagination. I have not been able to keep a diary a day in my life, but I've been able to write about other people's lives for every day since I was 8. So,
It's just, and maybe just then a coincidence that now he's got the bike. I mean, when
mhm.
you say about your first experience, it really just took me back to the first time. I mean, it was a moped. Does it count? But I was on the back of it.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, and we were
Yeah.
going in Bali, and it was the first time that I'd like sort of put myself in a position of trust, I guess, and with my
hmm
partner. And I was like, if you do anything. But
Yeah.
after I did it, I was sort of like, you know what? I could do this more.
It is definitely something. Like with my man, I am completely comfortable on the back of the bike, and there is a sense of freedom with that. And just, yeah, you can feel that you're so present. It's such a grounding experience. You, we often don't even just listen to music. We just have silence and we just go out, take off on the road. It's just this peaceful, grounding experience, and you're so close to each other. It's an intimate form of
Yes.
transportation and experiencing the world around you. It's incredibly beautiful. But if you're with someone that you don't trust, it's also scary as hell.
Yes. I think it has to come down to that trust element. Oh,
Completely.
completely. But so obviously I'm going to go to the Fallen. I feel like that was my first MC experience. Was actually
Oh, wow.
Lessons in Corruption, and oh my god, to this day I still love it. The reverse age gap. I think it's a bit of me. I really do.
I
Like,
love that.
yeah, there was just something so I don't know. I can't even think of the word, but it just made me feel something I'd never felt before. I was just like, "Oh my goodness," like the way that they love, and he was just like, "I'm not having a bar of it. You're for me." That's that. I think
hmm
just having that reverse, he's supposed to be younger, so he's supposed to be, not as strong, right? But that
hmm
just was not the case at all.
I love the reverse age gap because I really think that age in a lot of situations is kind of a social construct. Like
Mhm.
obviously there's being, illegal underage, all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, growing up, I said my favorite show was Frasier. When I was a kid, I would walk around at recess with the teachers talking to them about things. I was, a bit of a loser. But my point being that sometimes you have old souls, sometimes you have young souls. Sometimes you
Yes.
meet a 45-year-old man and you're like, you're 12 years old. And
Yes.
sometimes you meet a 18-year-old woman and you're like, wow, you are so mature and so self-aware. And I think that there's this illusion that as you get older, you get smarter, you mature, you become a better person, and that is not true. And
Yeah.
as I get older, I learn that more and more. It's a really fascinating lie that people tell us.
Mhm.
And so it is possible to meet people. And my whole life, I've been lucky enough to have friendships with people much older and much younger than me. And I find them so enriching because they're coming from kind of a different perspective, but
Yeah.
somehow we're on the same page. And it's a really beautiful marriage. And that's why I think I'm always drawn to this age gap trope.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I love it too. I find that like it's like you say, when you say age gap, it's not there's nothing underage. It's not supposed to be
Mm,
about that. It's about the relationships between an old soul, clearly, or it depends on the
mhm.
dynamic as well. It depends on the
Mhm.
dynamic of the characters. But obviously people are going to be very excited because you have another book out from the Fallen asking for
Yes.
and you must get a lot of people just demand more books from this series. I think it's such a well treasured series that when you come out with one, it's almost like the next day. So when's the
Yeah.
next one?
Definitely, definitely. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I love having people slide into my DMs and say, I want this character and I want this character. And, I'm so secretive about who comes next that it's also
Mhm.
kind of a game and this fun dialogue that I get to have with my readers where I invite them to kind of be a detective in my books and look for these breadcrumbs. It's one of my favorite parts about coming back to this series. And it's one of the reasons why I love that I take breaks in between each follow book to write other things because I think it's nice to it creates this nostalgia of going away and coming back. It's like coming home after a trip.
Oh, that's really sweet actually that you say that because I guess that comes to my next question. What did you love most about Boner and Blue's story? Like, what was it about their story in particular that just had you going, I love this book and this part of the series?
You know, every Fallen book has a different flavor because the characters are also wildly different. And I think with Boner, he was so fun to write, and he took me by surprise. I mean, I was intending for this to be like a 30,000 word novella, and it's like 86,000 words. So it's obviously I fell in love with him, and I think it was this idea. And he has a line in the book where he says, you know, she says to him, "You don't expect someone like you, this tattooed bad boy, to be funny."
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you know, former's a defense mechanism too. And it's really interesting to see we have this idea of someone with trauma being broken and brooding and angry and all of these things. And we all cope in different ways. And I think with both Boner and Blue, one of the reasons that they really resonated with each other and also with me is because they have lots of trauma. They're living through traumatic moments in the book, and yet they constantly focus on the positive, on getting through, on using humor as kind of fuel to get past that bad moment and into the next. And it's a really healthy, beautiful way to get through suffering.
Mhm.
And it was a different take on that than on any of the books in the Fallen. And I think it's something that I do too. So that was probably my favorite part, was the fact that they could come together and bring beauty and levity to each other through like these horrible circumstances. It really felt beautiful.
Do you always get a little bit nervous when it's coming out and your readers are reading it for the first time? Because I guess there must be a bit of pressure as well. You know, this is a well loved series, and I guess there's an expectation from readers of how the story goes and what they want to see. Is there a little bit of I'm going to shut myself away when it's out and just see what happens?
You know, it's funny. I was just talking about this with my husband last night, and he said, "You're a bit of a psychopath." And the reason he said that is
Love
because I do not get nervous. Um, And I think it might be, you know, a defense mechanism against the industry. And over time, it's an incredibly vulnerable thing to release a book into the world.
it. Mm.
You labor over it. It's a labor of love, and you kind of let a vein onto the page. And then there's people and there's reviews that are like, you know, I actually saw a review for one of my books recently that was like, I would rather die than ever read this book again. And I was like, whoa, you know, that's pretty intense. But at the same time, um, I kind of find if I write for myself and if I love the book, then
Yes.
that's where it ends for me. That's where
Hmm.
the door closes on on my emotional connection with how people review the book.
That
And
makes
I mean,
sense.
maybe it extends a little bit to the people close to me, like, you know, my editors, my proofreaders, my publicists, you know, they all read my books. And if they didn't like it, that would mean something to me.
Hmm.
But I think at this point, if I love it, that has to be enough. And I tell that to new writers all the time. If you need every single person to like your book to have a healthy mental state, don't be a writer. It's
Yes.
not going to work. You know, everyone is going to hate your books. Like
Hmm.
add something about your books, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. You know, we talked about Pride and Prejudice, one of the most beloved books of all time. If you go on Amazon, there's hundreds of one-star reviews.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's art, it's subjective, it's not for everyone. And I never take it personally unless someone attacks me personally.
Yeah.
I just don't, it's water off a duck's back, and it just has to be that way.
No, I think it's the only way you can be. Like you say, if it's because if you're striving for the validation, it's never going to happen because you might get it in spades, but then you know there might be just one scathing review. And I am a bit of a sensitive Sally, so I don't know if I could ever write because I'd be like, oh well, Janine from so and so hated it, so there goes my
Well, let me
career.
tell you, it's it's been a journey for me. I'm very, very sensitive. And so when I first released, I would only read the bad reviews, like the true masochist that I am. And I would read the bad reviews, and it would make me so sick that I would actually be physically ill. Like I would actually vomit because I would be so deeply wounded by the negative reviews. And it doesn't even matter if they were fair or if they were strange or whatever. Like, you know, my first book was The Affair, and there's a number of really bad reviews that are like, this is about cheating. And I always go, well, it's called The Affair. And if you read the back of the book, I mean, it's clearly
It's
not
not.
cheating. But I think that's the thing that you also have to realize. Sometimes people are in the a wrong headspace or they're
Yeah.
triggered, especially for the books that I write. I'm really drawn to writing about the gray zone between black and white. I like moral ambiguity. I like anti-heroes. I like age gaps. I like forbidden relationships. Anything that puts innumerable obstacles between the couple, I love. And
Mhm.
so those kinds of stories can be triggering for people. Um, and so I also have to just accept, well, if I want to write these types of stories, they're not going to resonate with someone with
Yeah.
a lot of people, and in fact, they're going to trigger people. So that's going to lead to negative reviews and people not liking me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It is the cost that I have to pay for writing what I love to write.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, there is, I guess, a market for books like that, though. That
Yeah.
for the lot that don't love it, there are the masses that do. And I think that it's so important that the minority doesn't drown out the majority. And you can see
Yes.
it in a lot of things, whether it's books, anything. Sometimes the minority can be very, very loud. It doesn't mean that it's the majority of it.
That is such a good point. It's so salient, especially because I think sometimes people forget that like the people that interact online are a very small sect of your readership.
Hmm.
Like a lot of people just read a book and then they don't post about it, they're not on socials or whatever. But they're still reading your books. They're still buying them. They still love them. And sometimes the online voices, I think we scale them too high.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't mean people don't love your books. Look at your sales, look at your, and look inside yourself. If you think it's like sometimes, you write a book and you're like, well, I haven't had this actually, but I know that some people have were like they felt compelled to write this book and they didn't hit for them. And maybe the reviews weren't very good. And it's like, well, I didn't love that book. And so sometimes we know that. Sometimes there's any kind of variable or something's going on in your life and you don't produce your best work. And maybe the reviews feel more fair or
Yeah.
whatever. They don't ever stop hurting. But yeah, it's just the way you kind of have to learn to process that pain
Mhm.
of rejection because it's inevitable.
Yeah. Oh God, absolutely. And it's just the way of things, like you say, when you put your art out to be judged as such, it's always going to happen. But I'm going to bring it back to the Fallen series because I'm going to be cruel. You've got the new book out, but do you have a favorite man, favorite woman, favorite book of that series so far?
Okay. That's a really tough one. Can I answer a different one for each?
Oh, go on. I'm
Okay.
here all day. I'm here
Um,
for you.
Honestly, I think that um, probably my two, probably my two favorite stories are Inked in Lies and Caution to the Wind.
Hmm.
I love both of those ones. I just like writing them was so they both just felt like me. They just both sometimes I just get in the zone with a book and I'm like, this is just a beautiful experience. And I felt that way for both of those books. My favorite, I mean, I don't really have a favorite man or woman, but today I will say who they are for today. And I'm always drawn to saying either King or Zeus, just because
Hmm.
they started this journey for me. I moved to Paris to give myself a year to write before going to law school to see if I could make it stick. And
Hmm.
I wrote and released Lessons in Corruption and Welcome to the Dark Side, King's book and Zeus's book. And by the time I came home, I could write full time. And so they kind of made my dreams come true, and they're the backbone of this series, both of them in different ways. A lot of people say Zeus because he's the president and he's got this big personality, but King is a quieter emotional touchstone for all of the characters, as is Cressida. Um, so I probably those two for my favorite men we'll say today. And then for my favorite women, um, I think that I'll probably say um, I think Cressida and maybe Lila.
Hmm.
Um, they're both very soulful.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for Cressida as well, I'm always a little bit protective of her because a lot of people don't like her, particularly after reading Lessons in Corruption. They're like, why wouldn't you just give in to King? And she was so wishy washy and whatever. And I love to see evolution in a book. That's one of
Hmm.
my favorite things in the world. And I love having an ongoing series like this because you can see evolution through all the books for all the characters, even after they're happily
Yeah.
ever after. And Cressida has such a beautiful journey, not just through lessons in corruption, but in After the Fall. And I loved subverting the norm of the man, the older man, teaching the younger woman how to live and how to
Yes.
kind of come into herself. And it's like the younger man is helping Cressida learn about herself, and she's the teacher. She's supposed to teach him, and it's just this fun dynamic. And throughout the series, I think she's a really soft
Mm.
place to land, especially for the women coming into the club. Lulu is also great, but she's much more protective and she's has a lot of trauma, so she's more suspicious.
Mhm.
But Cressida is just always going to be that loving source of energy, and I really, really love that.
I kind of agree, if that helps.
Yeah, oh,
I love
good.
Ted
Okay.
too. I really love Ted too. But I feel like a lot of people would know you from MC romance, but
Hmm.
that's not everything. We've got a dark romance table, we've got
Hmm.
sapphic romance, dark romance, and I'm a Mafia girly through and through. And look, I have to ask again for myself, do you see anything in the future with more Mafia? What's sort of in the works, I guess?
I think you'll be very excited because I actually just turned in my the first book in my Mafia duet to my Montlake editors. So I have a Mafia duet coming out next year with them. I'm very excited about it. It's I can't say too much about it, but it is set in Italy, so it's actually a Mafia romance set in the country, which Italy is my favorite country in the world, and I've spent lots of time there. And it's very Giana Darling. There's a lots of literary and historical references, cultural references to Italy in the story, and it's an age gap, and he's, an anti-hero,
Mhm.
and I just love the story so, so much. I cannot wait to share it with everyone next year. And it will be, yeah, a Mafia duet in 2025.
I I honestly was not expecting you to say that. So the fact that my question has like given me the exact answer I wanted, I'm just like, I don't know what's in the stars today, but they're shining on me because
Yes.
there's just something about Mafia, and I think it's actually the same as MC. There's this
Mhm.
sense of kinship, loyalty. The way they love their women is just different to any other genre because of the constructs of that. I guess the way their life is.
Completely.
And I just fold like a lawn chair every single time.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited.
It's
That is
just
good news.
Yeah, I'm very thrilled about it. I think, dare I say, it's my favorite book I've ever written, even. I'm super obsessed with it. And my publicist, like, she read it and she was like, I never have a book hangover, and I had a book hangover for 3 days. So that was very, very cool. The feedback's been really good so far. So it's fun to go back to Mafia. And actually, if you'd asked me if I would be known for MC romance when I
Mhm.
started writing, I would have laughed because I mean, you can't really see me, but like I'm a not a biker girl. I'm definitely it's not my vibe. And so Mafia kind of hits all the notes that I really love. Like it feels a little bit more luxe, a little bit more um, cultured in a way that really resonates with me. But then it also still has. I love the criminal mindset. Maybe it ties into my interest in dictatorship and throughout history. Just this kind of like really there's this sense when you're dealing with criminals in a love story, people who are willing to go above and beyond, the fact that they would do that for you.
Yeah.
And, especially if love is kind of antithetical to their way of life, and then they would choose you, and then they would do literally anything in their power to keep you safe and happy. There's just the stakes are so high, and there's
Yes.
so much possibility to really show the depth of the connection and the love there that you
Mhm.
can't get in any other genre, I don't think, and than you
I
can in like MC or Mafia romance.
hmm I completely agree, and I think that's why I'm so driven to that genre of books because it's
Yeah.
they when they say they'll do anything, that could be getting rid of someone else's hand. They'll do
Yeah.
anything, and I just think, yeah,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, it's fiction, but I guess it's just that inner strength and, like you say, the length they'll go. But that is
Yeah.
such exciting news. I was not expecting that at
Yeah.
all. That is so exciting.
I'm glad
And
you're excited.
I'm sort of reeling, like I have my feet up now. I'm like, oh my god, my like feet are like bumping into each other under the table. I'm having a little happy dance. That's so exciting.
Oh,
I cannot
yay.
wait. I'll have to have you on when it's about to go out, and we'll have to discuss it.
Yes. Yes, I would love that. I could probably talk about that book till the cows come home, so that would be great.
Oh, let me tell you, I'll be right there with you. Don't worry. That would be too much for me.
Awesome.
But I can't not talk about as well. You did a dark academia sapphic romance recently, Serpentine Valentine,
Mhm.
and it was just such a an interesting difference for you as well. Like, was there just a part of that story that you created that you loved that was different from all the others?
You know, I know it kind of feels like an aberration from my body of work, and yet it's so not. Like there's it felt still very Gianna. Like there's so many literary references, there's so many mythological and historical references. There's this sense of someone who's been wronged, and I'm always drawn to tales of revenge. I really liked The Count of Monte Cristo growing up. Maybe that was it, but it has all of those kind of Gianna Darling hallmarks, and I have always been drawn to LGBTQ romance. In fact, I mostly only read romance. So I
Same.
always had intended my first, yeah, I'm just obsessed with it. Like, honestly, it's a problem. I only read that apart from like a few very good friends who
Mhm.
write MF romance. But I would have assumed I would write an romance first, not a sapphic one. But it was something that I felt really compelled to write. Both because of my own experiences and because it kind of hit me recently in the last couple of years that this story about, it's a Medusa retelling. So this story about a woman who was sexually assaulted and then blamed for it and
Yeah.
punished for it by a woman.
Yeah.
It was the fact that that's still topical today.
Mm.
It just kind of eviscerated me. It hit me like a lightning strike. And I just thought, I have to tell the story right now. And
Yeah.
I wrote it in like 3 weeks of just intense writing, and it poured out of me, and it just felt like such a relevant book. And I had really zero expectations for it. I was like, it's a sapphic romance. Sapphic romance doesn't do as well as romance and other romances. Um, I don't know how much of my readers will read it, but this is a book that have to I just have to publish it. And it's still like people still read it, and I still get messages about it that are so poignant that, either people felt like the surviving sexual trauma, that resonated with them, or even like the coming out story for
Yeah.
Luna in the book that resonated for them. So it's kind of like emails like that when a story really resonates emotionally with someone. That's my favorite feeling.
Yeah.
It's getting those emails and knowing that like people feel seen. And I think that's why I'll always write stories with like diverse characters and kind of difficult subject matter, because I find it really beautiful and healing to see yourself or some of your struggle represented in art. It
Yeah.
it really helps you process it within yourself in kind of a safe way,
Oh,
I think.
I agree, and I remember at the time when it came out and seeing the reviews, and I feel like that was the consensus, that was the feedback, that it was something that a lot of people needed. That's what I was
Yeah.
getting from the reviews, and I just thought, what a beautiful way to be able to connect to an experience and the power that the book gave and the way that they, came away from that book going, I loved what was written and how it was written. And it was a really special book, just not at the time, but continues to be, because obviously people find it at different stages, right? So
Yeah, and it's interesting even. It does really well in bookstores,
mhm.
which is something that, not like my Fallen Men sometimes are hit and miss because, whatever. But then, that my sapphic romance that I thought wouldn't do very well, and it won an audio award, and so it was any kind of success and longevity that that book has really means a lot to me because it seems to mean a lot to people, and
Yes.
so it kind of felt like a gift to myself, and the fact that it turned into a gift to readers, really, that book will always have such a special place in my heart because of that kind of relationship.
Yeah. I can definitely see why. And look, I'm gonna have to ask you, do what else do you have coming up? Obviously, you've got your Mafia books, and is there anything else in the pipeline for Giana Darling?
Oh, there's always stuff in the pipeline for me. I'm always working on the next book. Yes, so I have my Hollywood romance trilogy
Mhm.
coming out next year, and that's really exciting. It's the brother Sebastian from my Lombardi family, so with the Evolution of Sin trilogy and the Enslaved duet and the Anti-Heroes in Love Mafia duet. So it's their brother, and he gets his trilogy that's coming out. And then I'm also entering my sports era. I actually have my first sports romance coming out later this year. And I'm really excited about that. I am such a sports girly, as you know, and so
Mhm.
it's funny to me that I have never written a sports
Yeah.
romance when I am like, I mean, I used to play Sporty Spice with my friends when we would dress up when we were young. Like I am the sporty girl, so I'm really excited about that. I cannot wait to. I haven't announced what sport or anything like that, but it's all the Giana Darling kind of hallmarks in a sports romance, which I'm thrilled about.
Oh my goodness, that is so exciting. And if there's ever a
Yeah.
Halloween party, you can be sporty, I'll be posh. So
Oh, you would
it's
be
sorted.
such a good posh. Oh, I love that. Yes. You know
Wouldn't
what?
you
My
just?
husband and I actually went as Posh and Beckham for a Halloween party once, and I feel like you and your husband should do that. It would be amazing.
It's funny because he was actually a footballer back in the day, my partner. So we could do, he's just not
There you
the
go.
colouring. I'd have to pretend I was with Messi or something because he's not a good
Fair
fit.
enough.
I need to have
Fair
my
enough.
moment.
Yeah, yeah. I love that.
My last question for you is actually, it's not book related because I know that you are in the Canadian area. That's where you reside. And I am
Yes.
so excited. In 2 weeks, we're coming to Canada. And I've been
Oh,
speaking to a girl.
yay!
I had to ask you, I was like, okay, you live in like in Canada, which I know it's very big and places are very different,
Mhm.
but surely the food's going to be about the same. So, as a foodie yourself, what are the things that you would be like, right, if you come here, you've got to do this, you've got to eat that?
Well, I do need to know where you're going a little bit because it is a little bit different. So, are you going to the East Coast, the West Coast? Where are you going?
Alberta and Vancouver.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, I live on Vancouver Island,
Mhm.
so I'm actually going to send you a list of some restaurants that I'll recommend
Okay.
for Vancouver because there's so many. It's such a foodie mecca. Definitely seafood and sushi. Um, we actually have like the most spoken language in Vancouver is not English, it's Mandarin.
Oh.
So we have a huge population, Asian population in Vancouver, and therefore the sushi is amazing. So
Mhm.
definitely like sushi, you've got to try that.
Yeah.
Just the fresh seafood in general. I mean, we're right on the ocean and everything's fresh every day. So definitely that. In Alberta, for food, I don't really know. I wouldn't really say that there's anything like maybe some like fresh fruit pies would be
Yeah.
really nice. You could also try like bison um, or venison because
Mhm.
they have that there. But yeah, I would definitely say I'm not sure where you're going in Alberta, but like Jasper is absolutely beautiful and Lake Louise.
Yeah.
Jasper, they are having some fires near there, so make sure you check on that to
Mhm.
make sure they're under control. But Jasper and Lake Louise are two absolutely stunning places to go. I can't recommend them highly enough. And then in Vancouver, you've got to go whale watching because we have. I just went the other day here and we just saw two baby orcas with their mom, and the
Oh my
babies were
goodness.
waving at us, and they were like just little babies, like 8 feet long.
Wow.
So definitely go whale watching because we have orcas and humpbacks, and you can see just everything. And then, yeah, I mean, it's just we have great parks, so take lots of walks. Walk the seawall. I don't know if you've seen 50 Shades of Grey, but it was actually filmed in
Mhm.
Vancouver. So the seawall where Christian Grey runs, you got to walk along there. You'll have such a good time. I mean, I'm biased, but I think that Vancouver is one of the best cities in the world. So hopefully you really like it.
Oh, I'm so excited and thank you so much. And just thank you for your time. Like you know when you just know you're gonna vibe with someone and
Hmm.
then it just happens, you're like, mm-hmm, I think she's a bit of me. So
Yes,
it was
there's a nice click of connection.
yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I've so appreciated your time and I want to do this again when the Mafia book comes out. We have to.
Please, I would absolutely love to. I could talk to you for hours, so I'm very
Oh,
grateful you made the time to chat with me today.
and hopefully we get a chance in person. That would be so much fun too. I'll have to
Yes,
see when you're
I would
free to
love
meet.
that. Yes, I would love that so much.
So I'm going to be cheeky as always. I'm going to take this offline and see if I can get any more information out of her. Guys. But thank you for being so, on the book tea with me. And I can't wait to have you on again.
Yes, I'll see you soon.
Like I said, girl crush. How can you not adore that woman. She is just so incredibly smart. She's beautiful and just such a diamond to talk to. And the fact that she said that she was going to be coming out with a new Mafia duet, my heart's still beating fast. I am so excited. And you know that I'm going to interview her when that comes out because I need to know the nitty gritty of those books. And her latest release, Asking for Trouble, is out now on Kindle. So these are the books that you need to be aware of this week. So we've got The Prey by J.L. Beck. It's dark romance. Always check your trigger warnings. It's out on August 9th and it's a part of her Oakmount Elite series. So I think I've read the first one, but I'm yet to read the second one. So as always, I'll be adding these to my TBR. Passenger Princess by Morgan Elizabeth. It's out on the 9th of August. Grumpy Sunshine, Bodyguard. Say less. And then we have The Hunted Heir by Holly Renee. It's a part of the Veiled Kingdom series. It's book 2 and it's out on the 20th of August. So that is all for today's episode. I hope you love this one. And as always, if you want to get in touch, I'm at VReads on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And that's the book tea this week.